welcome into Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, the debut episode of this brand new podcast conceived by Gustavo Tomazeli and myself. This has been a long time away, and we've been looking forward to working with each other again at some point. If you don't know, we used to work together with each other at WTK 90.3 The Rock in Knoxville, Tennessee. We've since moved on to different ventures. I've moved back to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Gus has moved all the way back to Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil. So we're literally in two different Americas. He's in the South America, I'm in North America, two different countries. But we still talk regularly about all sports. And we kind of just want to bring our conversations to you. What's going on in Brazil? What's going on back here in America with all the sports that we love. So, Gus, man, how are you doing? How excited are you for this pod?
I'm so excited. I'm so pumped. When I gave you the idea, because there's so many people in Brazil, podcast has been a fever, and I've just been missing speaking English, on the radio or just regularly since I moved back here to Brazil. I've been kind of like on a Portuguese more side of broadcasting. And I'm so excited to have a lot to start on our debut of our first, and I like because the title of the podcast is like they use describe so well. I'm in South America, you're in North America, so it's Brazil, United States, two countries, two America, but we're all sports. We're gonna cover all things in America sports, all things in Brazil, and some topics that will convey between each other. And our opening topic, it's a doozy because it conveys to soccer in Brazil, but also it's something that happened in Tennessee this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. The talk of the sports world is actually where we used to work, Knoxville. Of course, a pretty important football game happened between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Tennessee Volunteers. Ole Miss won that game 31-26, but that's not really what anyone is talking about. It's what everyone is talking about is the fan behavior that occurred at the end of the game. If you're watching the game, the Tennessee had a 4th and 24 with 54 seconds left in that game that they came up just a little short of, at least according to the officials. A lot of people think they actually got it. Some don't. Regardless of what you thought it was, what the result was afterwards was safe to say a pretty shocking turn of events. I know, Gus, you have a video.
Oh, yeah, from our fellow journalist Noah Taylor that I think described basically what happened. I think even the song.
Yeah, just to give you kind of like a context here, this is the South end zone in the Inland Stadium, so that's the part of the Southland. I marched in that for 3 years. So this is the student section right here. And essentially what you're seeing is a group of unruly fans throwing various objects onto the field, mostly beer bottles, water bottles, and different objects. And, of course, most notably, there was a bottle of mustard that ended up on the field and a golf ball that ended up on Ole Miss's head coach Lane Kiffin's periphery. Now, who started it? We're still not exactly sure. The latest figures from a local news station in Knoxville, WATE, was that around 20 people have been arrested. They were looking at another 50. I know earlier today, the University of Tennessee put out, asked students to identify anonymously other students who potentially were participating in this. Indications from people that I've talked to and I've seen on social media is that this apparently started from the upper deck, which is not students up in the upper deck. So very likely it wasn't students who began it, but it potentially was students who continued it on. And of course, this has been a very divisive situation because obviously I think the vast majority of people know it's wrong and have said it's wrong. But then I think the controversy comes in whether or not it's justified.
I have found.
Yeah, because I think obviously most people are going to say this is unjustified and should never throw objects onto a field. They could seriously hurt someone. Innocent people are getting pelted. I know people in the band are getting pelted. I know I was listening to Rock Solid Sports yesterday, and our former coworker Chloe Levering, she's currently in the fray now. She said that she got hit by, I think, 3 different objects during her time. While she was in the section when they had to go evacuate. And I know some of the other people I marched with, they got hit with some objects as well. And I saw videos from students in the front row. They were literally having to huddle like this. almost like you were like hiding from a tornado or something, because just balls were just coming over your head like this like the entire time heading down to the field. So it was an ugly situation to what was a very entertaining game. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room here is officiating, because
Oh, we have even comments. Thanks, Dylan Becker, for watching us.
absolutely, I know Dylan. I know you've been talking about how much you are going to go off on this tomorrow, and go check those guys out at WTK Rock Solid Sports. They'll be talking way more about that tomorrow. But
bring it to, I think, our perspective, and one of the things that, like, I like to talk about, that in Brazil, and I mean, my friend Bruno Slonik, he knows that very well. In Brazil, especially not, in the past, fan unruly behavior was normal. It was, unfortunately, we used to, like, it got so bad at times that, unfortunately, now when there's a rivalry game, especially in big cities, only the home fans are allowed to go to the stadium. And I bet this not happened to American sports, but it got to a point that that fan unruly behavior kind of punish the people who just want to be there and watch the game. I know it won't get to the extent, but I imagine if that kind of behavior repeats, what the punishments will be for the future. Because I know $250,000, it's still a hefty financial punishment, but I wonder what effect in terms of what will happen in the future. For example, like we used to we love fans rushing to the field. We love that on college football. I think it's one of the biggest things. But one of the things I'm afraid of is if that turns ugly, the things that would change in terms of the college fan experience, in terms of, I know this was a micro example what happened uh, at Neyland Stadium, but if it, what do you think, Nick, in terms of the pattern? Hopefully it won't repeat. If do, what the punishment would be?
yeah, and honestly, we almost saw that. I mean, if Tennessee had come back and won that game in the final second, because they were driving and had a shot to win it right there at the end, there's a good chance you would have had people rushing the field. And who knows what would have happened in that situation. So I think in a way we actually are kind of lucky that we didn't see that unfold. And, in terms of whether or not this could happen moving forward, at some point you're going to get someone who beats another team where they might have some fans who have aggression towards that opposite team. And that's, I think, a big reason why the SEC fines a team every single time the situation happens. We still have to remember we're still in a pandemic. I know that there's concerns about that. I know, for example, like in a couple of weeks, I'm going to go back for alumni band at UT, and they're not allowing the alumni band to march on the field with the Pride because they're significantly limited who can be on the field at any given time. So I know that's a significant concern when it comes to rushing the field right now. Or in a couple of weeks when college basketball comes back, the idea of storming the court as well, I'm sure that will invoke fines as well. But, obviously the worst case scenario is you have people rushing the field. And I think one of the things, one, you obviously potential violence. Because I remember a couple of years ago, I don't know if you saw that clip from, I think it was like UC Santa Barbara, I think. Someone rushed the court and just sucker punched one of the players. And obviously that was really, really bad. And then, I think another concern too is like crushes occurring.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely, American sports were, always kind of like the, model example in terms of, how fans were treated. Even, Brazil kind of compares to England in terms of treatment of fans. England in the 1980s, you had fans being, practically caged in with, big fences. The visitor fans who come to the stadium had to be in a separate section, and everything changed after the Taylor report in 1992 after Hillsborough disaster. Now England is modernized but still that's unruly behavior. In Brazil, it took another direction. Fortunately, right now, for example, yesterday we had the fans are coming back to the stadiums in Brazil after the whole pandemic kind of shut it down. But yesterday, only São Paulo fans were allowed to watch their team on their home stadium. Corinthians fans, even though they're in the same city, were not allowed to go watch the team because of all what happened in the past in terms of fan unruly behavior, fights in the stands, and everything. But in the same city, there were fights broke out in other areas. I know it's a big example compared to what happened in UT, but what is funny to me watching those scenes at Neyland Stadium is like that was so familiar to me and to a lot of Brazilians. If I showed that clip to Brazilian here, they were like, "Oh, that's nothing." They were just exaggerating because here we're so used to, especially in the 90s, in the 2000s, fans, being so unruly. I remember back in 2012, I was watching, a team in Sao Paulo, and that the fans wanted to do kind of like a not a ball walk, but like having like a party to host the bus. But they closed the street, and then the police kind of came rushing to the fans, and we had to run for their lives. So even when the fans wanted to do something nice for their team, sometimes the pattern of the police is just kind of, broke out the scene and kind of clear the way because they're so used to violence all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. In America, we have such a sanitized sports experience that most people have never been in a situation where there's true violence ongoing during a sports match. I mean, you might have some drunk fans fight each other sometimes, but it's not like a mass riot like this situation almost turned into. So you do have to wonder, especially with the way society seems to be going right now. I mean, if you look at, for example, airplanes right now, the airplane industry, they're dealing with so many unruly passengers right now. It's ridiculous over the various mandates. And just because there seems to be just, I guess, a lack of respect that has developed in our society over time. And you have to wonder if that's beginning to bleed in to college football.
I like the comment from Dylan Becker. I didn't know that. I heard a Flyers fan stabbed a Rangers fan after the New York beat the Philly in the Winter Classic. Whoa, that's crazy. Like
literally last week an Alabama fan got killed over an argument. So after they lost to Texas A&M. So I mean, there's just that stuff happens in every fan base. Doesn't excuse what Tennessee did. It's a shameful side of sports. And actually, like what Dylan said too about preventing alcohol sales, that's something that the SEC says they're looking at if this happens again. They're not going to remove that for now.
But to that point, like Bruno Slonik said, like people would drink before the game started because that's what happened in Brazil. That's what happened in Brazil. In Brazil, alcohol sales were cut out. I think it was the early 2000s because of unruly behavior. What the fans did, they drink before the game started. They were congregating, hours before a game, drink before the game, even with, people selling alcohol around the stadium, kind of like, in a more informal way. And then they go into the stadium. Now, only recently, alcohol sales came back, like the SEC. I mean, there was even the 2014 World Cup. Budweiser had to literally circumvent a law to go around that regulation and, allow drunk fans, allow fans to, drink beer during the World Cup games here in Brazil.
Yeah, I remember watching a video about that over just how many rules FIFA forced Brazil to circumvent, and just how it's just really a disgrace what FIFA did to Brazil, and it's a disgrace what they're doing to Qatar next year. And and that's something we could definitely talk about at some point, just how horrible of an organization FIFA is.
But I appreciate
Bruno is completely right on that. People are just going to sneak in alcohol anyway. You can sneak in moonshine, vodka. I mean, Lane Kiffin made that funny comment about how, the Tennessee fans probably wouldn't throw moonshine at me because they probably wouldn't want to waste something as expensive. So it was a shameful situation to what was otherwise a fantastic night. I mean, I was watching on TV and that atmosphere was unbelievable. It was giving me cheers, chills. I mean, honestly, at points I was near tears of how awesome that atmosphere was.
That was awesome. That's something I feel like I've been showing to a lot of fans here in Brazil as an idea. I think fans, soccer in Brazil could really benefit it, like it's a Checker Neyland idea. You have like, Palmeiras or like green and white, kind of environment, and there's other teams. I feel like we can embrace some of the American tradition because as you said, of course, Americans are known to be like a more boring, sanitized, and even I say unfairly because when you talk here to like some sports journalists who refer to fans in America, oh, they're so corporate, oh, they're boring, oh, they don't care about the game they're watching. I think there's such a narrow vision of what American sports fans are. I think, like, of course, by the end of the game was very bad, but what Tennessee fans did on that environment on Saturday was incredible. They really made an uncomfortable environment for Ole Miss to play.
Absolutely, and they were shook early because you got to give credit to Matt Corral. He was able to really calm his guys down and be able to just get it through. And it's like Dylan said, regardless of the anger at the end, the first 59 minutes of that game was the best college football atmosphere I've ever seen. So, it's just we just got to make it 60 minutes of an awesome atmosphere next time and not have the overblown anger next time. Of course, I'll be at the next home game when they play Georgia. Probably won't be able to make it the entire 60 minutes just because Georgia is that much better than Tennessee right now, but we'll see. Maybe it'll be even crazier, and I'll have an interesting story to tell here.
And a great point by Bruno as well that I maybe forgot to mention to you. Organized fans in Brazil are, they're drug lords because that's the one difference is like because Brazil soccer it's so politicized in terms of the way teams are run here. They're not owned by there's not a Jerry Jones, a Robert Kraft in terms of professional teams. Teams are kind of like a club. You have the president, vice president, a council, they have people who elect a president. So the fans became like also a part of this political environment of clubs. So organized fans as well. They sometimes even unruly and sometimes even paid by a group inside a team, a different political opposition group of the team to kind of create a mess to pressure, to maybe win election of a team. So that's a different environment as well to compare in terms of a fans relationship in America. Because fans are kind of like consumers, a Dallas Cowboys fans, they have the membership, they buy. Here in Brazil, they even turn into voters even because, sometimes fans here, they become members of a club and they even can vote in the club election.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely much more of a business in America. You don't really see hooliganism at an American level. Although if any fan base were to pull that off, I feel like the Tennessee fan base could pull off like some sort of a hooligan form, like you had old school like in England. I mean, but at the same time, I don't know if I'd want to see that.
Because college football, I think, is the closest thing to the way South America or even European soccer environment is. I think that's the closest thing because you have the passionate fan base, you have the relationship that college sports, especially college football, have with the fans. I compare to the soccer environment in Europe and South America in terms of you pass through generation and and of course a lot of fans were of NFL, MLB, and even NBA be like, oh, but we have passionate fan base too. But college is different, Nick. You've been to many sporting events in America. College fan base are unique. They are the top most passionate fan base in the United States of America.
Yeah, and it's so regional too. Like it changes between conferences, between schools, between states. So this won't be the last time we see an incident like this, especially if the SEC does not fix its officiating. We will 100% see more. And hey, man, Dusty, we also were talking about WTK back in the day as well. So.
And another topic for another day. It was interesting to see fans complaining and even the teams complaining about SEC officiating because in Brazil, it seemed like oh my God, NFL or the American football has all figured out in terms of, officiating. They're so perfect. And, Brazilian referees, they are the worst. They are bad. And they are, And here, Nick, is crazy. Did you know that referees here in Brazil that, they officiate matches that involves like, really big matches. They're part-time referees. They have to, for example, officiate a game on a Sunday, and on the Monday morning, they work as a bank teller, as, on a retail or other jobs. I don't know. That would be something you should see. I imagine in America,
I
in
think in
the
college
college.
football, it's like that too. Like the
Oh,
unlike
really?
in the NFL, like if they're not like full time refs either. So I think
So
that's one thing for as
that's a
big.
pattern.
Yeah. So for as big as the SEC is, they should be able to afford actual referees.
Yeah, and that's a good pattern. Like, do you see, like, where is the most complaints about referee? I feel like, where they're not professionals, like XCC and the Brazilian league as well. Because when you don't professionalize the officiating, they can't be at their highest level because they are probably not up to par. And SEC games right now is a millions of dollars game. So you have to be professionalized. That's what something interesting I didn't know about the SEC officiating are not professional. Because in Brazil, that's the biggest discussion in terms of referees have to be full time, not like a part time thing.
Yeah, and going back to what Dylan said, this crew messed up the Memphis Mississippi State game from I think week 2. Gave Memphis a touchdown, ended up helping them win the game there, which was just absolutely insane. And I believe Arkansas too. I think against Ole Miss the week before also got screwed in that game. So it's just this particular crew led by Mark Curls is just they literally have been investigated. So I don't know why they were still allowed to officiate a game, especially one of that magnitude.
And one thing that the Brazilian sports media discussed is like idea like referees having to give in press conference and explain the controversial decisions. What are your thoughts about that? I don't know. I'm very because it's like of course it's like you put in a show and stuff, but of course because coaches have to explain their decisions. Why not referees?
I absolutely agree, especially with just how much money goes in these games now. I mean, literally, to stay at Tennessee now, you can officially gamble on sports. Like these refs need to be accountable for their actions, and they're just not right now. I know that Greg Sankey, for the commissioner of the SEC, claims that they do get graded. I'm just not seeing it. They're not getting any better. We have a controversy almost every single week. There's always some fan base that gets hurt, and frankly, if they don't change it, this won't be the last time you see a situation like this.
And I
And it
like
won't be
that.
just
And I
Tennessee.
like
Like,
and
I
I
know
like
Brandon
Dusty's
Walker.
and I like Dusty's point as well. Sorry. It also feels like the SEC refs almost go against the Tennessee. And that's exactly what happens when you don't have a professional referees. Every fan base feel like their team is being robbed. That's why I literally been discussing Brazil. Like, the president, the sports directors of the first division team in Brazil is there's a whole conspiracy theory. This team to win the tournament, or that team to win the tournament, or my team is always the one who gets told. So when you don't have a professional officiating, that's the feeling of the fans.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and obviously, I'd have to look at the statistics on whether or not that's true. But, you know, at some point, they're going to have to address that before you see more incidents like this, because you don't want to have incidents like this. It's not a good look for anyone in the SEC to have an incident like this. But this was a situation that could have been prevented, should have been prevented, but just unfortunately was not. And that's just, hey, they say it means more in the SEC, except when it comes to the officiating. But at the same time, you do also have to say, if you're a better team, if you don't drop the punt at the beginning of the game, if Baylor Jones dropped that, if you are able to stop Matt Corral from running up the gut every single third down, then maybe you don't need that 4th or 24 at the end of the game to win. So, there is a point for saying, you should be good enough to not have to have the game come down to officiating like that. So I think, there's also some merit when it comes to that. But it is true that the refs did completely take away a touchdown from Tennessee for literally no reason in the first quarter. But they had several other opportunities to
And for
win that football
example,
game. They just didn't do it.
and like and football in America has been way more established, and I feel like they're more used to like video reveal, like the VAR of football has been way more established. In Brazil they started literally, I think it was like 2018, and they're still getting confused, and here in Brazil the VAR kind of make the refs feel way more insecure, so they now like controversial calls. they waited because they know the VARs they're watching. I wonder if having video reviews also make the refs on the field also insecure in football.
Yeah, and I think another topic too, like what Dylan brought about the embellishment penalties. That this is ridiculous. Out of 78 offensive plays Tennessee ran, 23 of them had to be stopped for Ole Miss injuries. That
I have a term for
injuries
that.
in quotes.
I will defend that. I will defend. I'm sorry. I know Dylan and
How
Dusty
can
are
you
gonna hate
defend
me for
this?
that. I'm gonna defend it. In soccer here in Brazil, that's called cachimba. It's a term called when a team kind of wants to, do stuff that are not right, but they used to the statics kind of like, because when I saw those things at Ole Miss, like that was still familiar to me. Like Argentina's soccer teams like love to do that, fake injuries, slow down the game, make the other team nervous, provoking. That was so. I feel like Lane Kiffin watches soccer games in Brazil to get some of those ideas because
He's a
that
big
was so
Neymar and or Messi fan for sure.
not even Messi. I feel like because Messi is still tied to European kind of soccer. That's literally what Ole Miss did happen on a weekly basis, and especially in the playoffs in Libertadores. It is a South America competition. This is so used to, like, especially Argentinian team. They, fake injuries and complain to the refs and provoke. So that's that's what I thought the static of I call what Lane Kiffin did as the South American way to kind of provoke the other team.
Yeah, it is really, really interesting, because it is something that transcends multiple sports. And I've heard, because I know I was hearing someone, the other day talk about how, if you show that game to a soccer fan, they're going to be like, hey, you told me that in football, this doesn't happen, but it does. So, I mean, there's several potential solutions to this. I think one is for someone who does it, they have to stay out for the remainder of the series or even the remainder of the quarter.
No, I,
If you have to go out for injury, so there has to be like an injury clock or something. Because right now, being able to like fake an injury, go out for one play, and then come right back, it just isn't working. And it's slowing down the game. That game lasted 4 hours and 45 minutes. Like the game started at 7:30, did not end until 12:15. It was ridiculous. Game should not last that
I ended
long.
up sleeping by the end because it was like 1 a.m., 1:15 a.m. when they finished here in Brazil. I'm gonna stay up, but that's fair. But one of the things I heard about that is that in football, the injuries, supposedly are tougher, more dangerous. So you can't rush a player to leave the field because soccer here, especially recently, players have been more forced to like leave the field faster when they get an injury. They have to stay out until like the other team finishes their attack or something, then come back. But I think in football it's harder because when an injury happens in football can be really life threatening situation even. So you can maybe something like that would be harder.
Right. I think there are some potential solutions to that as well. It's just clearly the NCAA committee has to fix this because this isn't the only game where this is happening. I mean, Penn State Iowa last week also had a lot of controversy over this as well. So it's just something that has to be fixed. But that's enough time. We don't do UT game reactions anymore. We don't want this to be just UT reactions. Although we both love the ball, talking about the balls, it provides much great entertainment because we were there for McDonald's bags and everything else.
Oh! Speaking of which, I know this. Do you saw Jeremy Pruitt? His latest.
Oh yeah,
I know
yeah. His
definitely was talking
lawyer
about.
Lionel Hutz claiming
Oh my!
that we are not bluffing.
Oh, that's
Yeah, because if you
and it's
know
not
what I'm
for,
talking about, right? The lawyer from The Simpsons. Like, I bet Jeremy Pruitt went to that. I can't believe it's not a lawyer shop in the mall to get his lawyer to do all that.
and and it's so funny in terms of this kind of when a coach is fired kind of situation. I feel like in America, of course, is this Pruitt situation is like one in like 100. Like normally, because in Brazil they had to literally institute a rule that a team only can fire the coach once throughout the season, once. But there is a loophole. If there's a common agreement between the coach and the team to like end their contracts. So a lot of teams start to have this common agreement happening a lot. So it's just crazy in terms of when a coach leaves a team. I know in America it's like the Pruitt situations, is rare, but in Brazil it's like happens a lot.
Yeah, it
In
sounds
terms
like
of
the Ed Orgeron situation, where basically they're mutually agreeing to part ways, technically.
yeah. But
Yeah, so
let's move on to our
yeah.
country
Would you want to
topics.
go into American topics or Brazilian topics first?
I'll start with the Brazilian topics real quick. The Brazilian championship is the talk of the weekend, as the top four teams kind of slipped in. Atlético Mineiro lost to Atlético Goianiense 2-1 with another controversial ref decision that led the Atlético Mineiro direct the management blaming the ref for their loss again. And Flamengo, the second place, tied with Cuiabá, and it was a disappointing, moment. And Flamengo is really the best team in South America, even I think to the entire America. I wish one day that CONCACAF and CONMEBOL, the South America, North America, North and Central America, kind of like soccer, could reunite and make a big championship so we can play American teams. Flamengo is definitely the better team, but they're so focused on the South American Championship, Libertadores, and even the Brazilian Cup. So I don't think they're gonna, try to get the Brazilian, championship, the Brazilian EPL, for the third straight time. Especially their coach is not into much like he's more like into a playoff tournament kind of better coach than the regular season one. So we'll see about that. And also, in Brazil right now, it's interesting that a lot of foreigner coaches are being successful. There's Palmeiras as the Portuguese coach, Abel Ferreira, even though he won the Libertadores last year, he's been really criticized by the media and the fans because his team kind of plays poorly, but he made it to the final Libertadores again. So it's going to be interesting to see, about that. So let's go to America with Nick.
Yeah, let's definitely get into some American topics here because there's certainly a lot of interesting stuff going on. So obviously NFL, we're in the swing of things. It's after week 6. And obviously I want to start with my Titans. What a game. We were watching that while we were playing the show yesterday. And that was just a back and forth game. There were 7 lead changes during that game. Derrick Henry, the best running back in the league, just dominated 143 yards, well on his way potentially to another 2,000-yard season. Currently on pace right now for 28 touchdowns. I don't know if he'll be able to keep that pace up because that's just an incredible pace he's on. But they're 4-2, beat the Bills, who a lot of people think that are potentially the best team in the league. But these Titans, they're so up and down. I mean, they literally lost to the Jets 2 weeks ago and then come back and beat the Bills. So they don't make any sense. But I'm hoping this is the game that jumpstarts them moving forward. Of course, you got the Arizona Cardinals. They're undefeated right now. They blew out the Cleveland Browns the other day, 37-14. Kyler Murray is one of the MVP leaders right now. And we'll see.
What was interesting about that game, the Cardinals and the Browns, it was how, because it was the two former Oklahoma Sooners quarterbacks matchup, Baker Mayfield versus Kyler Murray. And one seems kind of better than the other. And the Browns are asking, is it worth it to sign Baker Mayfield to like a pro deal?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been that great this year, so I'm interested to see what they do for it. I'll tell you who isn't going to be in that conversation in a few years. Spencer Rattler, the Dallas Cowboys. They're 5-1. They've got 5 straight wins. Only loss was a close one to the Buccaneers. These dudes look really good. Tony Romo was gushing all over them. Of course, you expect him to be since he is a biased, former Cowboys quarterback. He thinks they're a Super Bowl contender. I'm not completely sold. They've played somewhat of an easy schedule.
I think their division kind of, made them look better than they actually is. The Washington football team, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the New York Giants are, in a level below the Dallas Cowboys. But that doesn't make the Cowboys a Super Bowl contender.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, it's still really early, though. We're not even at the halfway point. We got one more year this year. Or one more week this year, actually. We got 18 weeks. So that's coming up here at week 9. So we're going to see who emerges as the contenders and the pretenders. I'm going to move to baseball, NLCS, ALCS, and I was happy about this topic up until about an hour ago because the Braves had a 2-0 lead heading into today. They now are only up 2-1 because they blew a 5-2 lead in the bottom of the 8th inning, thanks to everyone's favorite reliever, Luke Jackson, letting the Dodgers come back in the game, and the Dodgers win 6-5. So they're up 2-1. Right now, I actually have the Red Sox and the Astros up. They're coming back from a break, so they're about to have the score of that. I think it was 2-1 Red Sox, if I'm correct. They're in game 4 there. Boston leads that series 2-1. So obviously, it's 2-1, bottom of the 6th inning there. The Red Sox have a runner on first base. The Astros have a new pitcher on the mound, Phil Maton.
In terms of the ALCS, how interesting is both teams that were involved in the so-called, stealing sign scandal being back to the ALCS? Literally,
they clearly never stopped, I guess.
Yeah, and of course, the New York Yankee fans, my shout out to my friend Bruno Slonik. I don't know if you're still watching, but, he made a good point. Like, the Yankee fans are the one hating to watch the both teams that were involved in the scandal, rivals, being there matching up to be in the World Series.
Yeah, I know, I have a Yankees friend myself who's rooting for the Braves because he hates both of those teams and doesn't like the Dodgers either. So the Braves are truly America's team right now. Of course, they're going to have to find a way to win one of the next 2 games. Yeah, and this game, though, is huge. Like, if Houston can come back and win, then I don't know if the Astros could come back from 3-1 on the Red Sox. The Red Sox are just really, really hot
And the
right
question
now.
about Atlanta, and I was talking about it, is Atlanta a choke sports city if they again lose to the NLCS? Because the 28-3 Falcons loss in the Super Bowl, I think, still haunts the city of Atlanta. And
yeah, they got the 3-1 last year. Yeah, the Hawks that didn't win in the Eastern Conference Finals, although I really wouldn't classify that as a choke just because they weren't expected to make it that far, and they never really had a lead in that series. So,
I mean, of course, they're gonna say, oh, but the Atlanta United won the MLS Cup, but it's still not the same. I feel like, of course, they have to win a major, tournament. And you can even say the Georgia Bulldogs. I know they're not from ATL, but Athens is like an hour away.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask, if Georgia wins the national title, does that count as breaking the Atlanta sports curse?
That's interesting. Yeah, and because they lost in Atlanta to Alabama, that was a heartbreaking loss. That's why they counted this Atlanta choking mystic.
Yeah, and actually, I've been thinking about this recently. For any Vols and Braves fans in here who are fans of both teams, which is a lot of people, would you be willing to sacrifice Georgia winning a national championship for the Braves winning the World Series? Because I've thought about this, and as much as I don't want Georgia to win the national title, I'm willing to let them win the title to let the Braves win the World Series and, just end the Atlanta sports curse. Because why not? And maybe the Hawks can go win the finals because that would be fun too.
Oh, man. Bruno's watching. He say, one provoke us. Bam. Oh, no.
Yeah, that's who the Vols play this week. And that'll be interesting. Rutgers.
Yeah, he's from New Jersey. He's from New Jersey. So isn't Greg Schiano, the infamous Greg Schiano?
Yeah, Greg Schiano. Talk about another time that Knoxville was rioted. But that's a story
for another
time.
Another day.
Yeah. Hopefully there's another coach situation like that in Brazil, just so we have an excuse to talk about that situation.
And Dylan brought back a great point about the NHL. I'm currently watching my Islanders beat the Chicago Blackhawks, and it's so weird to see NHL on ESPN. I don't know what Dylan stands for. It's so weird to see NHL on ESPN.
Yeah, I love NHL on TNT. Their coverage is the bomb. Like Wayne Gretzky in studio, lit. Like so awesome. Like the segment that he had last week with Charles Barkley was hilarious. And Kenny Albert as the lead play-by-play is going to be great. Obviously, you're never going to be able to replace Doc Emmerich, who is happily now in retirement. But Kenny Albert, I think, will make a fine replacement, at least on TNT. Because I haven't sat down and watched a full game yet. Another one just because there's so many sports on, but I'll have to really just sit down and evaluate what ESPN's crew is like. because I know they're going to go back and forth on the Stanley Cup Finals for the next couple of seasons.
And here, and Bruno is watching, he can testify that ESPN here in Brazil kind of dominates the market in terms of American, American sports broadcasting, of course, because ESPN is they bring all the, even college football they bring by the end of the year. Remember back in 2016, a Brazilian crew broadcast the Music City Bowl between Tennessee and Nebraska, and I was like, whoa, that was crazy. So we are used to watch ESPN broadcast all the American sports, but I feel like the NHL on ESPN, that's you guys said, yeah, he said Fox as well, but that was recent because of the merger between Disney and the 21st Century Fox that kind of affected America as well. With I think the deal was different, but it's nice to see NHL becoming more nationalized broadcasting.
Yeah, because NBC wasn't doing that good of a job. Because I like the broadcast and stuff, but the network was just they were putting it on like USA and CNBC, and it's just like it was hard to find the games. Like now, with it on being on ESPN and being on TNT, it's gonna be way easier to find the playoff games. And obviously, NHL Network needs to get a little bit more visible. Like you see the NFL Network or the NBA TV or MLB Network B, but at the same time, I think this is a giant deal win for the NHL, and I hope it really sets them forward. It kind of reminds me a lot of 20 years ago when NASCAR got their deals with Fox and NBC. I mean, that really propelled that sport forward in the early 2000s. And, of course, they've now returned back to NBC. And, just having that consistent broadcast partner is massive.
And one thing that is interesting, I was thinking about that. I know we only have like 18 minutes left, and I've been loving this first episode. Thank you so much for everyone commenting on it. It makes us really happy. But it's interesting you talk about broadcasting because in Brazil right now, streaming has been really like YouTube literally burst the broadcasting rights to the biggest stage soccer championship here. TikTok has been broadcasting games in Brazil. Twitter.
Yeah, no, recently, and at least in America, I know TikTok technically has more viewership minutes than YouTube. So, I mean, that makes sense. I'm waiting for the day that Netflix starts, showing sporting events.
But in terms of like actually broadcasting games, I don't think TikTok broadcast games in America, but they're doing in Brazil. YouTube, purchase broadcast here. Amazon has broadcasting rights in Brazil as well. So, and also the teams are starting to broadcast on social media with their own kind of group. It's like if the Cowboys had the Cowboys TV network and they went on YouTube and Facebook and broadcast the games with their own crew.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with Bruno in the comments. Streaming is gonna kill regular TV. Like it's inevitable, and you're gonna see in the upcoming TV contracts that's what's gonna happen. Even when you look at the NHL contract, most of the ESPN games are just on ESPN Plus. So it's where things are going.
But one point it is discussed. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
And we all just have to adapt to it. And I think it's going to make everything better because we're going to be able to watch more events, which is great.
But one thing that is weird, for example, in America, people, the general population has a better access to internet service. Mostly people in America have like a phone with a 4G network, and 4G is very reliable in America. So there's more access to regular internet. In Brazil, and Bruno can testify that people still are not used to watching anything on their phones and smart TVs. The larger population still are used to watching the normal cable TV, and so compared, like Brazil is really pushing hard to have sporting events broadcasting on streaming, even though I don't think the majority of the country is still ready. But in America, which I think has like a more base for that, the internet and the people are used to watching streaming, the sports league are kind of resisted to that too. You don't see NHL or NFL or NBA or even the MLS putting big games on streaming. They're still only putting maybe a Thursday night football or a preseason game on a streaming service.
And I'll say for leagues like the MLS or like the WNBA, leagues that are young, trying to develop their fan bases, why not go all in on streaming? I mean, that's where you need to go because, you need to go get those younger fans who are still trying to figure out what leagues are going to be allegiant to, because these older fans, they're going to be more set in their ways. They're going to watch the sports they watch and not really try out new sports as often. Younger fans, that's where it's all at. And going through YouTube, going through TikTok, that's how you're going to keep your brand alive. And that's where streaming definitely comes in. So, I mean, in all countries, and really, too, if you're an American company, yeah, if you want to get your reach into Brazil, into Argentina, into Chile, into any country in South America or any other continent, streaming, that's exactly where it's at.
Yeah, and here we have the Star Plus, kind of like the ESPN Plus, and ESPN here has been really pushing game stats. That's a good point. Like leagues are kind of trying to get to those fans, but the older generations, like there's people even who still don't have a smart TV or even don't know how to put a game on the smart TV. It's interesting, and given COVID, as Dylan pointed out, boosted popularity of streaming service. So I wonder what is the effect of this decade in terms of that. But
oh, yeah, that's going to change everything, in terms of just even fan experience. Like right now, stadiums are having to rethink about what, fans experience at the stadium. Because I know, like at Neyland, for example, they're doing all kinds of different stuff to try to really get the fans to come back in. Of course, evidenced by the fact they got a first sellout in 5 years. And I'm curious to see what they do in Brazil, because obviously fans are coming back there. What the experiences can be to make it more convenient, because as much as I would love to be in Neyland, and I'm going to be up there in a few weeks, at the same time, it is just convenient to sit back on your couch, be able to watch from the comfort of your own home. Food is really, the next room over, and you don't have to pay $12 for a beer. So it's all about the fan experience, and that's what stadiums are going to have to think about if they're going to compete with streaming and the ease of access of all these sporting events.
And to and getting to that point, just finish up this topic, and I think it will be a great topic for another episode. And the fan experience is gonna have to be way improved, because in the 80s and 90s, sports were the biggest live attraction. People had to go to the games because there was no other option. But today, a lot of people think, why would I leave my couch, drive to a stadium, all the hassle, if I can watch this game on TV with my phone and then watch something else later? Or even, like, why would I have to stay 2 hours to watch one game when I can just watch the highlights later and let's talk about on the internet? So they have to be way more compelling arguments or even attractions for fans, either US or even Brazil, to attract fans to watch games. Doesn't matter if the NFL, NBA, MLB, or even minor league games.
Yeah, and it's got to be a good experience too. I mean, if you look at Neyland, that was an insane experience the other night. And obviously, despite how it ended, everything before them was just, it looked incredible to be at. But most stadiums aren't like that. Most stadiums are stale. They aren't, doing that. I mean, look at Vanderbilt. I mean, my God, they were asking people to pay $1 to go see them play Connecticut a few weeks ago. And that is the complete antithesis.
And it's funny that about that.
Experience.
I don't know how to do that, but I wish I could trick Brazilian sports fans who love football to trick them into be like, let's watch American football, this great stadium. And then they would just, I imagine if they would recognize Vanderbilt as worse, because, of course, I think a lot of Brazilian fans will actually pay $1 to watch Vandy in Connecticut, and they would enjoy it because a lot of people just, in Brazil,
dude, I would have gone and paid $1 to go watch. If I lived in Nashville, I would have 100% gone to that game, because that would have been just. It would have been a great. It would have been. It was actually a great game though. Yeah, there was a 30-28 final that Vanderbilt won, but I mean, still, that was just one of the worst matchups you'll ever see.
And I like Dylan's point, and it's a great topic for another show as well. American sports, worldwide, and especially in Brazil, because NBA had preseason, NFL has been talks of having a game here, so that's gonna be another topic for another day. But time now for our hot takes of the week, and you, Nick, start with your hot topic of the night.
Yeah, so like American, it actually really goes in with what we were talking about here. What in the world is the MLB doing? The scheduling for the playoffs is absolutely abysmal. Like today, this is Los Angeles Atlanta game that's in Los Angeles. Started at 5:08 p.m. Eastern time. That's 2:08 Pacific Standard Time. Why are you starting a championship series game on a work day at 2 p.m. in the host city? That stadium didn't even fill up to like the sixth inning. And I'll give them the Dodgers fans credit. They were loud at the end of the game when their team made the rally, but you could tell it affected the home team because it wasn't a primetime game. I understand the West Coast, they're going to have 5, 6, 7 p.m. starts. And so technically the sun will be out, but at least you're going to have a night game by the end of it. 2 p.m. starts just aren't going to cut it. And then you look at the divisional round, like literally Atlanta had to play a game at 1 p.m. on a Monday. Now, granted, it was technically Columbus Day. Most people don't really celebrate that, at least in the South, where the Braves fan base is. I know it's more celebrated in the Northeast, but it just doesn't make any sense for a sport that's losing out to the NFL, to the NBA with young fans. You can't be doing stuff like putting playoff games at 1 p.m. or 5, or whatever. And I understand they're trying to like keep it to where it's one playoff game at a time, but you got to bite the bullet when it comes to the division round and just put a couple of games on time simultaneously, because that's what the Stanley Cup does. You know, the Stanley Cup doesn't put on a game at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Yeah, you might not be able to watch every single game at the same time, but you know, most of the time you're going to have a game that's like a blowout and you'll go over to the game that's closer or vice versa or whatever. And it's just imperative that for the local fan experience, you have the games on in prime time. Period. Unless it's a weekend. And that's what the NFL does. Like, at least they can get away with a 1 p.m. start time on a Saturday or Sunday because it's Saturday or Sunday. You can't get away with that in the week unless it's like a holiday. But you know, that's my opinion on it. The MLB needs to change how they do wildcard scheduling, because I truly think it's killing their game to have playoff games in the middle of the day. What do you think, Gus?
And I agree with you. And and that will be kind of like my point to the topic here in Brazil as well, because and what is interesting, because I feel like the leagues are more focusing on the network time demands than the actual fan experience, and there has been a big debate. I remember in Brazil, a lot of times the major network here push games into 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night. So a lot of fans would go to the games, and I was one of them. It had to leave 20 to 30 minutes before to catch the last bus or the last subway ride to go back home. And also a lot of fans, you had to stay up until like midnight or 1 a.m. on a weekday or a work day because the network wanted that time. So I wonder if that happens in America as well. If like TBS wanted the time slot of 2 p.m. on a Tuesday because it will be a better ratings for them, or be better just to their network schedule, because that's happening in Brazil. Like the major network here wanted the 10 p.m. on a Wednesday for their broadcasting game, even like in major cities, because it will fit on their broadcasting, time slot better. And then they don't care about the fans in the stadium. I wonder if that what happens in America as well.
Yeah, I know that happens a lot, especially with like NASCAR. That because like the networks always want them to start their races on the East Coast at like 3 or 4 p.m. so the people on the West Coast can watch it like noon or 1. But what happens, especially in that sport, is it ends up making the races more susceptible to weather. And sometimes you go to tracks without lights, like for example, Talladega. You know, a couple of weeks ago, they tried to start a race in the middle of the afternoon. They had rain issues, and because of lights, they couldn't finish the race. Or like New Hampshire earlier this year, they tried to start the race, I believe, at 3 p.m. They dealt with rain off and on. They couldn't go the complete distance because darkness fell upon them. It's really interesting because going back to that Brazilian example, that the local authorities wouldn't like have an extra bus or something for y'all to leave the game, so you could like enjoy the entire game. But and that's the dichotomy that these networks and leagues have to work with, because yes, you want to optimize your TV ratings, but you can't continue to sacrifice the in-person experience for television, because eventually you're just not going to have an in-person audience, and that's going to make the TV product worse. I mean, look at the ratings for sports last year. Just terrible, especially like something like the NBA, where a lot of people was claiming, politics were the reason why the ratings drew, and that might have been a part of it. But I think a huge part of it was, watching basketball in the bubble where there was no crowd and it was just in front of screens. It was just weird. It was a weird atmosphere. And like last year when the NBA playoffs were finally back in front of fans, especially those in Milwaukee and Phoenix and down in Atlanta, Like it was far more exciting. It was far more
Yeah,
exciting to
and
watch.
and 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 to that point, Nick, I'm gonna be curious as well if that effect will happen in Brazil because soccer ratings also here has been down last year. The major network here has been scrambling to stay afloat, and their ratings have been dropped like 30 to 40%, which should be like 2 or 3 years ago. But of course, they play in front of empty stadiums for the past year and a half, and the fans are only recently coming back. So I wonder if that effect would, be happening in Brazil as well. If fans being back on the stadium will also bring the, fans in the TV to, watch it and be more, enjoying the game environment as well.
Yeah, and Dylan Becker actually brought up an interesting point here about finding it more enjoyable because you could hear the players making calls. And I could definitely see how some people would say that. But then again, I think back to Peyton Manning with Omaha. Like, he did that in front of full stadiums, the whole Omaha thing. So you can still hear the players
And
sometimes
people
with the
get tired of
voices.
it. I think at the beginning, it was fun as well when there was no, when the soccer came back in, I think it was July, 2020, and we can hear, what coaches talk to players and the refs talking. At first was a new thing, but after 4 or 5 months, people just got used to it and got bored of that, and they started missing the sound of the fans, the fan reaction also in the watching from TV as well.
Yeah, like I think about like Luka Doncic's, I believe it was game 4 against the Clippers in the bubble where he hit that game winning three. Like I feel like that shot's going to be kind of forgotten about because it wasn't in front of a crowd. Like that should have been in front of a crazy crowd in Dallas. But we'll just remember as that shot that was made in the bubble. And it's actually it's funny because your hot take is kind of wraps into this whole topic we've been talking about.
Yeah, my hot take is it worth it to have Monday nights, games in Brazil? Like yesterday, big game, Sao Paulo, Corinthians, big as it gets. Sao Paulo's new coach, which used to be a big player, Corinthians have this kind of like new exciting team. But it wasn't on a Monday night, so it kind of made the game feel less appealing. It made the game feel less than it actually is. And I know on Sunday there was another game in the same city, so the authorities kind of scared of that. You don't want to, playing a big matchup and then also another game in the same city. But I think there's got to be a way with that. I think it could be played on a Saturday or even move the Palmeiras game to a Monday and then Corinthians, Sao Paulo, Corinthians, because those kind of big games should be played on the traditional time slot. Here in Brazil, it's like a 4 p.m. on a Sunday. 4 p.m. Sunday, Sao Paulo Corinthians feels big as it gets. It's like a Cowboys and Giants Sunday night football. It makes the game bigger. So that's my hot take. It's like I hope in the future big classic games in Brazil not play on a Monday night because it make the game feels smaller than it actually is.
That's interesting because, like in America, Monday Night Football is an institution. For the longest time, that was the game of the week. What was on Monday Night Football on ABC, but it's just interesting to hear how in Brazil the idea of playing a game on a Monday night is asinine.
And also it's because also when the game's on a Monday night, it's on pay-per-view. So people that don't have pay-per-view can't watch the game. They have to rely on radio broadcasting. For me personally, it was great because I was broadcasting the game on the radio and the ratings went up because people had to rely on radio to listen because a lot of people in Brazil cannot, especially in the economy right now,
And
cannot
you should
afford.
explain the whole radio thing because this is fascinating. Because in America, you have radio broadcasting rights, but in Brazil, anyone can broadcast a game, and this just blows my mind.
No, yeah, there'll be topic for definitely another comparing this kind of like radio kind of culture between two countries. But just to finish my topic, it's like so Monday night on a pay-per-view, it make the game feels less popular, smaller than if the game was played on a national television Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m., which is the time slot for soccer in Brazil. Like if you ask any soccer fan in Brazil, like what is the time slot they want to watch soccer? 4 p.m. on a Sunday because there has been such a traditional time to watch soccer. But unfortunately, especially the major network here, that kind of controls not as big as it was in the past, but still kind of plays a major role here in Brazil. They want to push their pay-per-view sales so bad, they bring those big matchups to a time slot of a pay-per-view to try to push sales of the pay-per-view for the Brazilian Championship. What I think it makes sense in their corporate standpoint, but I think the league kind of makes devalue of the big games.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you try to change an institution like that, it's always going to ruffle the feathers the wrong way. And, sometimes you have to do stuff like that to grow the game for the greater good of it. It's Brazil and soccer. I don't know how much bigger you can make soccer in Brazil. I mean, it's already the sport of the land down there. So
And I
I don't know why
remember
you
a
would
few
shake the bed.
Yeah, and I remember a few years ago, Brazilians were even considering, having games on a Saturday morning, so it can appeal to the Chinese market because we'll be there. I think it was like a Friday or Saturday night. So of course, we always wanted to appeal to other markets, but you can't kill your traditional audience. And I think to connect to your Major League Baseball point, what extent you can sacrifice decisions for the broadcasting when when you only prioritize what's good for the broadcasting, not for the fans. In the stadium or even outside, because I bet a lot of people in Atlanta, couldn't sit and watch the game the way they wanted. A lot of people were there at work, having to scramble to have a radio on, hiding from the box from their bosses, or having the game on like a hidden, screen because they were working on a Tuesday afternoon and they're, the NLCS game Braves, even Atlanta fans, I bet suffer to watch the game. Not only the Dodger fans.
Right. I mean, 5 p.m. even is early for a lot of people. I didn't expect us to talk too much about broadcasting tonight, but it's a topic I love to talk about. There's something you love to talk about as well. But
So that's for next week. Sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, hey, that's the beauty of podcasting, right? You never know where these things are going to go. You have a plan, and it goes in a completely different direction. But hey, we'll be trying to do this every single Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. I believe it's Brazilian time.
Yes,
right?
11 p.m. Brazil.
Yeah, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Pacific. And, I'm not going to go over every time zone in the world, but you can do the math from there. But for Gus Tomazeli to my left. Yep, there we go. Right
in
over
Americana,
here.
São Paulo, Brazil.
Yep, Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil. I'm Nicholas Hill in Chattanooga, Tennessee of the United States of America. Thank you so much for watching the first episode of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. We will catch you next time. Take care.